The lamp in the bedroom burned low that October night, the flame steady inside its old glass chimney. The way it had burned for 48 years in this same log house. Martha stood at the window, looking out at the dark corral where the cottonwood leaves rustled silver under the moon. She wore the soft white nightgown she had kept since their 20th anniversary, the cotton worn thin from countless washings and countless nights. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, his shoulders rounded a little more than they used to be, the weight of chores and years and worry settling there. He had pulled his boots off slow and set them side by side the way he always did, even when his knees ached and his back reminded him he was 62 and not 32 anymore. Martha turned from the window, her hands folded in front of her, the way women do when they are gathering courage for something tender. It hurts, Thomas, she said, quiet, but let's try again tonight. Thomas looked up at her, his eyes gentle in the 2K and lamplight, the same eyes that had looked at her across a crowded Grange Hall dance in '67, when Elvis was still alive and the world felt wide open and full of promise. He saw the faint blush on her cheeks, the way her fingers worried the hem of her gown, the small tremble in her lip. He knew what she meant. They had not come together as man and wife in many months. Not since the doctor visits and the quiet talks and the long nights when sleep stayed away and desire felt like something from another lifetime. Come here, darlin', he said, his voice low and warm like coffee on a winter morning. Martha crossed the braided rug slow, her bare feet silent on the wool, and sat beside him on the quilt her mother had pieced from feed-sack cotton. When the children were small, Thomas reached for her hand and held it between his two big rough ones, the way he used to hold a frightened mare until she remembered she was safe. We don't have to, he said, gentle, not if it hurts too much. We got a good life just as we are. Martha shook her head. Soft hits, not that kind of hurt. Thomas sits, the missing can die. Miss you, I miss us. Thomas felt something loosen in his chest, something he had carried tight without knowing. He swallowed once, and not a die, miss you too, he said, every single die, as she leaned in then and rested her head on his shoulder, the way she had the first night they ever spent in this bed, young and nervous and laughing, because the mattress sagged in the middle and pulled them together, like it knew something they hadn't learned. Yet Thomas turned and kissed her forehead slow, then her temple, then the corner of her eye, where the little lines had gathered over the years like gentle footprints of all the smiles and tears they had shared. He tasted salt there, not from sorrow tonight, but from the sweetness of being close again. Martha lifted her face, and their lips met, soft at first, like the first time all those years ago, when he had walked her home from the dance, and the moon was full, and neither of them knew how to say good night. Kiss deepened, slow and easy, no hurry, no need to prove anything, just the quiet joy of finding each other again in the dark. Thomas's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, his fingers threading through hair that had gone silver but was still thick and soft to his touch. They moved together, gentle, careful of aching hips and tender places, mindful of the bodies they lived in now that carried the story of hard work and children born in winters endured. Martha felt the familiar strength in his arms, still there beneath the years, and Thomas felt the same soft curves he had fallen in love with, now fuller and dearer because they were hers, because they were home clothes slipped away quiet, no awkwardness, only the hush of fabric against skin and the small sounds two people make when they have known each other longer than they have known anything else. The lamp painted them golden shadows long across the log walls where pictures of children and grandchildren smiled down in black and white and faded color. Thomas laid her back against the pillows, slow, his eyes never leaving hers, asking without words, and Martha answered with a small nod and a smile that trembled only a little. She reached for him, her hands sure on his shoulders, guiding him home the way she had guided him through every storm life had sent their way. They moved together, easy, like a slow dance. They had danced 1,000 times before, only now the music was the creak of the old bed and the wind in the cottonwood and the soft catch of breath when pleasure long mist rose, warm and sweet. Between them there was no rush, no need to chase anything, only the giving and the taking, the quiet yes of bodies that had grown old together and still remembered how to speak love in the language. They had invented the first year they were married when the world was new and every touch felt like a kid. Discovery Martha felt tears gather again, not from pain but from the deep gratitude of being wanted still after all the years. After stretch marks and worry lines and the long dry season when touching had felt too heavy, she whispered his name like a prayer, and Thomas answered with her name against her throat, his voice rough with feeling. When the wave came, it came gentle, rolling through them slow and thorough, like summer thunder far off across the plains. They held each other close, riding it together the way they had ridden everything else. Side by side, hearts open afterward, they lay tangled warm skin to warm skin, the quilt pulled up loose around them. Thomas's hand rested on the curve of Martha's hip, right where it had always rested. When they slept, Martha traced the scar on his shoulder from the time the bronc threw him in '74 and smiled. "Into the dark hues still fit me," she whispered. "Like you were made for it." Thomas chuckled low, his breath stirring her. "Her always have long as you'll have me," Martha turned in his arms and kissed him, soft and slow-tasting, both of them on his lipsium. "Not going anywhere cowboyer, stuck with me good," he said, sleepy and content. "That's the best news I had all year." Outside the moon climbed higher, silvering the frost. On the grass, the old house settled around them with small familiar sounds, the tick of the grandfather clock downstairs, the soft pop of banked coals in the stove, the faint jingle of the wind chime Martha's mother had hung the summer they moved. Inside the bedroom, to people who had learned that love is not only the fire of youth but the steady glow of embers that refuse to die, drifted toward. Sleep wrapped close, the hurt eased, for now replaced by the deep, sweet tiredness that comes after giving yourself wholly to someone you trust with your life. Martha felt Thomas's breathing slow and even out his arm, heavy across her waist, anchoring her safe the way he had anchored her through births and burials and every ordinary Tuesday. In between, she smiled into the pillow and let her own eyes close. Tomorrow there would be chores and coffee and the small bickering over whose turn it was to feed the stove, but tonight there was only this quiet reclaiming, this gentle reminder that some things grow better with time, like wine, like cottonwood. Trees, like the love between two people who chose each other young and kept choosing every day after. And in the soft dark, Martha whispered one last thing, so low only the night and the man who held her could hear. "Thank you for still wanting me." Thomas tightened his arm, just enough to answer without words, the same way he had answered her the first night they ever made love, in the back of his pickup under a sky full of summer stars. "Always, darlin', always."